Hello, everyone. Welcome to EMP Skillshare on this lovely July day. My name is Amina, and I'm the Director of Resources of the National Emerging Museum Professionals Network, NEMPN. I'm tuning in from the unceded territory of the Musqueam people, the city known colonially as Vancouver on the UBC campus. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce tonight's Skillshare session and tonight's speaker. So just a quick introduction to this series. The EMP Skillshare series is all about knowledge sharing, building communities of practice, and creating speaking opportunities for our fellow EMPs. Folks in the NEMPN community are invited to submit proposals for webinars, demonstrations, or workshops focused on an area of their interest or expertise. This EMP Skillshare presentation is sponsored by Drexel University's Art Administration and Museum Leadership Program. Thank you, Drexel. Today's session is Digital Exhibitions, Strategies and Platforms, where we'll explore a few different options for creating and managing digital exhibitions for professionals of all skill levels. This is something I'm really curious about. It's something I don't have a lot of experience in, so I'm really eager to learn. And we have a fabulous instructor today to help us learn. So today we have Anna Nielsen. Anna is the Education Assistant at the Museum of Anthropology in Vancouver, BC, and is currently finishing her Master's in Museum Education at the University of British Columbia. She has a passion for increasing accessibility across all forms of arts and culture. Her most recent curatorial project was as digital curator for the virtual exhibit of MOA's Shadows, Strings, and Other Things, the Enchanting Theatre of Puppets, which received the 2020 Canadian Museum Association Award of Outstanding Achievement in Exhibitions. Also, Anna is a colleague of mine, and I might be a little bit biased, but she's a fabulous educator, and we're in for a real treat tonight. So over to you, Anna.
Hello, everybody. You guys can all hear me? Perfect. So first off, thank you, Amina. We're physically right now just like right below each other in the same building. But obviously I just want to start off and acknowledge that both of us like live, work, and study on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Hunkaminam speaking Musqueam people, as well as the connecting lands of the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish First Nations, for whom have stewarded land since time immemorial. And I'm immensely grateful for their continued stewardship. I also grew up in Seattle on the land of the Duwamish people. And I think it's important to think about our connection with the land, especially in reference to digital exhibits, the way in which we're interacting with different cultures' works from anywhere in the world. And I would be honored if any of you want to acknowledge the land that you guys are situated on. Feel free to put it in the chat. Take a moment to think about it. If you don't know, feel free to look it up. There are some great websites, nativeland.ca. You can look up your location, but I think knowing the land that we occupy and that we continue, whether we are invited or uninvited guests, is an important grounding exercise that we should all think about each and every day. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat or turn your cameras on. Secondly, I'm going to share screen. So if everybody, Amina, maybe just want to give me a thumbs up if you know it's going to work, that would be great as well. Can everybody see that?
It looks great. Yes.
Perfect. I can't actually see you anymore, Amina, so that's good to know. Great. So today I'm going to talk about digital exhibits. I'm going to talk a bit about how I got involved with them, about some strategies in which I use, but also about some strategies that I encourage other people to use. And then I'm hoping to turn it into a conversation and maybe have you guys send me some links to some digital exhibits. We can talk about what we like and what we don't like. So if you have any, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'm hoping to get to them afterwards. Shadow, Strings, and Other Things, the Enchanting Theatre of Puppets was an in-person exhibition at the Museum of Anthropology in 2019. As Amina mentioned, it won the 2020 award from the Canadian Museums Association. And this exhibit featured over 230 puppets from Asia, Europe, and the Americas. It explored the art of puppetry, storytelling, and its digital counterpart, which the digital exhibit we'll be focusing on, was done through a 3D Matterport scan and lives on a website that we developed, shadowstringthings.com. We're going to take a look at this site, but I can definitely send everybody this site afterwards. So the site itself was envisioned to be a kind of like active art space, archive that expands the lifestyle the lifespan of this exhibit, features content of the exhibition, but also allowed us to add additional content that didn't make the physical exhibit, and to really think through how in which people engage with exhibits not within the walls of a museum, and thinking through what material do families or schools need. So you can explore the exhibit just on the website, on your computer, look at it on your phone. You can use Oculus Rift kind of like goggles. You can even use like the Google Cardboard goggles. There's quite a few different ways to explore. But before I launch into the website, a bit of background. So of course, all of us are aware we are living in a pandemic. And starting kind of in like January 2020, a couple of months before COVID-19 was declared a world pandemic, many cities around the world were beginning to feel the effects of it. Many museums were closing, and tons of museums rushed to produce digital content. I think we can all think of examples of different museums producing really well thought out digital content and maybe some less thought out digital content. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about today is why certain exhibits maybe worked better than others. I'm just gonna make sure my slides will switch, which they're not switching. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, there we go. So when we think of digital exhibits, I think it's important to remember that digital exhibits can mean, oh, sorry guys, the computer's acting up a little bit. There we go. Can mean a lot of different things. It's a descriptor that encompasses such a wide range. It can encompass things like this, where you've just got collections online that look quite academic or a bit librarian. It can encompass video games. It can encompass something a bit more didactic with lots of text, or some really creative options, like both the Met and the Getty in early COVID went through and digitized their entire collections to be available in Animal Crossing. So people could take different works of art and put them in their houses in Animal Crossing. There's been exhibits within Matterport. And so digital exhibits have also taken on that kind of gamified role. But what I'm going to focus on today is kind of this like hybrid, both really fun and educational, that really just focuses on a user engagement. I kind of have like a couple main, I guess, like schools of thought around digital exhibits. So one, do not attempt to replicate the in-person experience exactly the same. You can't. It's not the same as being in person in an exhibit. And I think that's where a lot of digital exhibits get stuck. But make sure that you embrace all that is unique about digital channels. And the ways in which people engage with digital content is different than in person. And there are some great benefits to that, as same there are some limitations. Also really focus on educational and experiential outcomes, because I think that's one of the like biggest strong suits for digital exhibits. And then also focus on the user and the engagement. Like, what does the user want? It doesn't have to be high tech. It doesn't have to be AR. It doesn't have to be VR. There are so many different options, and some of them are really approachable. So don't be afraid to use something that might feel simple, because oftentimes just having any digital is better than having none. But what I'm going to focus on today is like what our recuration process was. So in this upper left-hand photo, you'll see an image from the string stage in the exhibit, physical exhibit. And then you're going to see on the lower side, sorry, it's a bit blurry, a digital iteration of the exact same stage. And I just wanted to touch on the ways in which, like, yes, it looks different, but how we're engaging with it. Yeah, I guess to begin with, one of the first things that Nikki and I in the process noticed was that wall texts are going to be different, photos are going to be different, and our time. The amount of time you get tired on a digital screen, that digital fatigue, the way it impacts you is really different than the physical fatigue of being in an exhibit. So how did I get involved with this project? It was a bit coincidentally, I was a student of Nikki in a graduate undergrad seminar course about museum methods, looking at practices and collecting practices and field research, looking at ethics of museums. And one of our final projects was to create teaching kits, which, there we go, teaching kits for virtual exhibits, but for the Museum of Anthropology in response to her physical exhibit. And in the process of creating the teaching kit, Nikki actually asked me if, rather than doing something specific to a type of puppet, if I could create a user guide for this VR scan that had been made. This was all pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, and this VR scan was originally done just for archival purposes, so that we would have a record of what the museum or the exhibit looked like when you walked through it. And I said, sure, I've never done this before. I don't really know anything about digital exhibits, but let me go for it. And that's where the journey started. I didn't know anything about digital exhibits when I started, and now I've curated an entire website and recurated an entire exhibit. So it's definitely something that anyone can do, which is like really, I hope the theme of this presentation is that I learned everything while doing it. And now I'm continuing to work on other digital exhibits because I think there's a huge opportunity here for like public accessibility, as well as diversification of the way in which we engage with exhibitions and the content within them. So let's hope this does it right. Okay, perfect. So before we launch into the exhibit, I wanted to talk a bit about the recurating process, but also looking at the curating process for the actual exhibit. So this is all the way back in those very first curation meetings for the physical exhibit. And you're going to see here that on the left-hand side, you see a small scale mock-up of one of the stages. And this one right here is the string stage. And next to it is the original mood board for the exhibition. I want to highlight that in that top corner, it says play, wonder, and magical. So those were three of the key words when creating this exhibition in person. And that word play ends up being a main theme in my user guide and mood board for the second exhibit. When we talk about these different types of digital exhibits, you can talk about all these different types, but play is something that I really emphasize is important. You want the user to be able to enjoy the experience and have a bit of ownership over it. And I think play is a great word to kind of sum that up. My next slide kind of features the two themes that I presented to Nikki when I presented my user guide. So explore and play. Now, this might sound really simple when those are the two themes, but I wanted to make sure that the user guide, the visitor felt like they could effectively use and understand the VR exhibit, and that they'd be able to both explore confidently within the exhibit, but also have opportunities to play with the interactive aspects. And you'll see how these like kind of played out. Oh, funny, in my curation process. So first off, we're going to launch into the website, which hopefully this will, nope. Ta-da! So I'm just going to reload the page for you. So when you join Shadow Strings and Other Things.com, you launch into this landing page. So this landing page, you are welcome to the exhibit. You see our little awards from winning the 2020 Outstanding Exhibition Award, and you get that quick one-sentence summary. Award-winning exhibition, 230 puppets, just like that brief information that someone needs if they have no idea what this is. The background video is this video that starts to bring you into the magical world that is this exhibition. As you click enter site, then you're on the landing page and you're able to move around. So of course, first we're going to go to the virtual exhibit itself. So as I mentioned, this virtual exhibit was done in Matterport, which is actually a real estate software, and I'll touch on after this. But what's great is when you click right on it, you're immediately able to launch in, and it's going to send you right into the exhibit. If you want, if you're really keen, you can just hop right in, start exploring, click on the different stuff, tour around, maybe click on some text panels and see what we got. Lots to look at. But if you maybe don't know how to use the exhibit, one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that this key was right here. Just the most simple and basic information that someone needed. How do they enter? How do they walk around? What do they need to do? How do they go to the dollhouse or see the floor plan? One of the other things we did is thinking about color. So we color coded each of the stages. So just that really quick information right there that gives somebody how do they explore before they launch into all the extra content. As you move down, you're also going to see that we've got, these are all things that we think add in the way that you're going to explore this page. So how to explore, a bunch more details now, more information than just that quick key. Over here, this is kind of for kids and families. We've got puppet hide and seek, maybe some questions for engagement as they go through the thing, or play your own game of I Spy. We've also got how to make your own shadow puppets. And then on the left-hand side, we've got curator tours. So these short videos take you on a curator-led tour. It's about 5 minutes on each. And it's one way that if you maybe aren't as comfortable looking through the exhibit on your own, you can just watch each of these, and they're filmed within the exhibit within Nikki's voiceover. So quite a few different ways to engage just on this one page. But I also want to show you something else that we did. We labeled this the stages, but it's a bit of a deconstructed virtual exhibit. So here what we've done is we've deconstructed the exhibit into each of the 5 main stages. And this allowed us to add all of the content. Sorry. Add all of the content in a bit of a different way. So when you click on these, you can expand them so they're a lot bigger, but you can also add so many photos from things that weren't able to be added into the physical exhibit. So this puppet right here from the Mortal Coil Society, it stands at the entrance of the exhibit outside, but it was also marched across the bridge in Vancouver. And we're able to give a bit more content about that. We've got each of the each of the stages as you go through, tons more content throughout them. And lastly, one of the things about a digital exhibit is you can continue to change and add it. So these mamalungos from Brazil, they were originally intended to be part of the exhibition, but they were held up in transit from Brazil and never arrived in time to be a part of the exhibit. So they never got to be shown, but here you can see each and every one. You can see the stage that was made for them. And it's really nice to be able to add in all those things that maybe we didn't have time to add in before. Up next, I'm also going to take you, oh, sorry, let me see if I can get this to, there we go. Over to some of the other details that I love. So activities, this is another way to engage with the exhibit, is we've got these learning packs. So these are those teaching kits that the kids in my class made. Each one is really different, definitely shows a bit of personality. I've got a little description of each one. And then when you go into them, they've all got their learning objectives, questions. See if they'll load. Here we go, characters, makers, and activities that you can do. So another great way to engage with the exhibit outside of even just the digital sphere, but something you can do in person in your home. You can print them out. You can play with them in so many different ways. I also want to highlight over here the things that we are able to bring out. So videos, one of the things I learned in curating digital exhibits is how little I focus on videos in physical exhibits. In physical exhibits, often digital screens might be small, or there's lots of different things playing and you're walking in at different times, maybe towards the end, maybe towards the beginning. You sit down and watch part of it, but there's so many things pulling your attention, whether it's the physical belongings or the text panels or other people, that I never found I sat and watched the videos as much. But here you're able to sit, you're not reading anything, you can just sit and listen and engage with it quite differently. And so it can really privilege the videos that are involved when you're using a digital exhibit. There's also, in a physical exhibit, often you cut those videos down to being shorter to show just clips of things. Here we're able to add both the clips as well as the total length videos. So there's lots in here. I will point out that on the stop motion, we have 2 full-length films by Amanda Strong. So you can watch both of those here as well, which is great. The other thing we're able to highlight is the puppet makers. So this exhibit wouldn't exist without the puppets wouldn't exist without the puppet makers. And all of these puppet makers and puppeteers have such incredible stories about the ways in which puppets have touched them and touched their life, how they got into it, family history. And so stories that might not often get told in exhibits themselves are able to be told here on the puppeteer page. We also really wanted to aid in transparency of exhibitions. So we created this podcast series where we're able to interview, so sorry guys, I should have brought water to my table. Where we're
I'm just above you, Anna. Let me know if I can get you water, okay?
Okay, maybe. We wanted to aid in the transparency of exhibitions. We wanted to email people like Skooker Broom, who was the exhibition designer, and he talks about the philosophy behind the design and the challenges that he faced within creating this exhibition. Also a bit about his like crazy life of like rock and roll. We want to interview Nikki and talk about ways in which she engaged with the exhibition, how she learned about puppets, why this came about, what she faced as she curated it, and really aid in that transparency of what a museum does and how it does it. And lastly, we've got this about section, which is a bit more of the archive. So here we've got what the exhibition is, a 2-minute introduction on what the digital exhibit is, how do you move around it. We've got the exhibition catalog that was created by the amazing graphic designer of the exhibit, Cody Rocco. You can download it and flip through it. A bit about the award, our virtual exhibition team, some different publications that we've done, some of our conference presentations, all of that kind of stuff that you think of on the academic side of an exhibition, some of the articles that were written about it, link to podcasts, different public exhibitions that was happening. You've also got every single label of the original labels that were in the exhibition, the physical ones. You can also see what's on there because I'm going to talk about how we change the exhibition labels for the virtual, all of the videos, and of course our thank yous. So swipe back. That is our, oh, come on. Our brief introduction to the entire website. But back to speaking about like how this was actually done. So first off, the scan was made not in response to COVID, but it was made in response to how do we preserve physical exhibits that take years of work to go into, so much labor, so much love. They stand for 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year, and then they come down and what's our record? Sometimes there's a book, but what else can we do? So this scan was done with Matterport, which is for real estate, actually. Of course, that means that since it wasn't made for museums or for the arts field, it absolutely has some limitations. It's not possible to like import photos and video content into Matterport, but it has to live on another website or another form. So that's where we obviously kind of like another push to create this website that we did. It also, when we started the process, was pretty simple. And as we went through, so many more adaptations were made to the website and so many new capabilities, which has been really interesting as we launched the site in December of 2020. And I haven't had to edit too much of it, but the couple times I've had to go in, there's so many things where now it's a push of a button. And I had to find like huge workarounds. So it's nice to see that they are advancing the software. It's also really easy to use. It took a tripod and a phone. It didn't even take a 3D camera. It was just a phone, download the Matterport app, and some slow. It took them about like 6 hours, I think, but to have a full 3D scan that you can move through like that, I think is well worth it. And you didn't need to invest in a 3D camera or anything. So that side of it is really accessible. And honestly, there are so many ever-growing companies producing more and more opportunities for 3D scans. If you do have a 3D camera, you can also just import that content into Matterport, and they have a really user-friendly screen for editing the exhibits. I'm just gonna try to fast forward this slide that isn't moving. Well, if you could see the next slide. There we go. I'm going to talk a bit about how a user explores the exhibit. So this was something that we sat down, and to be fully transparent, Nikki and I are of different generations, do different experience with technology. And for me, I quickly hopped into the VR and knew kind of how to move around. I had an idea that you could use the arrow keys or use my mouse, but so many people are going to open it up and not know how to do that. So we really wanted to make sure that there were like multiple points of access for how to use it. So color coding, just really simply, because then when you're in the exhibit, sometimes you get turned around, and if you know the exhibit really well, you know where you are. But if you don't know the exhibit, it can be quite confusing. So kind of giving some clues that way, giving clues for easy information on that key. In the physical exhibit, there was also a key, but it spoke more to what the 5 stages were and less to how to physically move around the exhibit. Because of course, in a real exhibit, most people understand they can just go where they'd like. And the 5-minute mini tours came about because a lot of people just wanted to watch a video and they didn't want to explore the VR. These videos are also embedded. Well, they're on our YouTube, they're on the website, and they're also embedded within the exhibit. So when you enter each of those stages, and you click on the introductory text panel, you can also see the 5-minute video, and it kind of gives you a bit more context without having to read everything. So I thought that was a really great chance for us to like just make sure we had content available in more than one place. One of my best advice for any digital exhibit is make sure there's like multiple points of access and multiple ways to see the same content. So next, I think it should be the text panels. If this is gonna, sorry guys, I'm using this new screen and it's thinking its own thing. So this is the biggest thing I did, is what you'll see on the left is a text panel that was in the exhibition. What you'll see on the right, a text panel that was used on the digital exhibit. On the left-hand side, you can have as much text as you want. You can print it out really, really big, and you don't really need a picture because it's right next to the image that you're looking at. But first off, for computers, we had to orientate them horizontally so it looks better on a screen. And we realized there was just way too much text. Not sure where everybody is from, but if you are in the museum sphere, you know that text panels are often quite short. Even the shortened text panels in the physical exhibit were far too long for our digital exhibit. So Nikki and I kind of hacked apart these exhibits into just synthesizing the most important details. And we made sure that every single text panel, no matter what it was, had an image on it. Because just staring at screens and screens of text was going to be really overwhelming really fast. So yeah, this is just like a good example of like two of them that got redistributed. So if you do go and explore the exhibit, you'll see that every single one looks like that now, with at least one image on one of the sides and not as much text. That is also why we wanted to add all of those text panels on the website for research, or if anyone does want the full text panels, but we synthesized down to what we thought was the most important part. So the other thing is about this like transparency, and making sure that people know more about exhibitions and exhibition process. We thought that was a really great opportunity within digital exhibits that you can change people's perspectives and at least like just give them a window into the process. What you'll see kind of cut off on that right-hand side is some statistics, but those are actually old statistics now. I checked the exhibit analytics just last week. And since we launched December of 2020, so a year and 8 months, the virtual exhibit has seen over 3,000 unique visitors from over 70 countries since launch. And our podcasts have been listened to by over 600 unique individuals in another 35 countries. So I think that international aspect is something that we talk about with digital exhibits being accessible everywhere, but I don't think we sit down to really think about what it means. One thing to think about is this whole site. I made sure all the text could be translated by Google Translate. So you can be looking at it anywhere. And of course, it's not perfect. Like we didn't translate it, but it has the opportunity to be translated and read by anyone anywhere. And that is not everybody can travel to the Museum of Anthropology during the 9 months that the show happened to be up in person. And I think that's something that's a bit overlooked when we talk about the power of digital exhibits. Ooh, sorry. The other thing that's really great is for the puppeteers and puppet makers, we were able to tell their stories. Oh my goodness, why are we not? Sorry.
It's only fitting that in a Skillshare about digital stuff, we have technical difficulties.
Yeah, Amina and I are using a new screen today. Okay, well, we're gonna hang out on this slide, unless maybe they're just in the wrong order. Nope, okay, back we go. So what you can't see, because the screen just isn't working, it is quite fitting, Amina, is that it meant a lot for the puppeteers to have something that they could point to as well. So they like use the website and will point to it. Their stories are told there. And I think it's something that sometimes we overlook is the like makers behind the work that we show in museums. And then of course, also, I point this out as I showed you guys the digital exhibit, but videos, I personally like am not big into watching videos in exhibits. And it really shifted my perception of what a video can do and the ways in which we engage with them on a digital exhibit. So we were able to show also just like all these puppets in action. So one of the things about the show is the show was about puppets, and puppets are meant to move. And when you're looking at, yes, it's a VR that you can move around, but the image was taken still. And so being able to show each of these works in movement adds so much to our meaning of the works that we're showing as well. So I don't want to talk too much about this one exhibit. So I'm gonna pop out of this share if my computer will let me. And I wanted to open it up into a bit more of a conversation. I want to know, does anybody have any digital exhibits that they can think of that they really liked, that they really hated? It can be honestly either, or any questions about digital exhibits.
I definitely, oh, Ariel has a question. Ariel, you're welcome to unmute yourself, and you're also welcome to turn your camera on if you want to, but you don't have to.
Hi, this has been a really interesting talk. I used to work, we were sort of in the front of the house, but our organization would do a lot of born digital exhibitions, so things that are exclusively online, and we sort of had the issue of people coming in expecting to see the online exhibits in person. And you said that sort of this online version lives much longer than the in-person. And I was wondering how that sort of got navigated, whether you had, similar issues. And then I guess if you had a chance to talk sort of about exclusively digital, like no physical content, or I guess physical content, but not like physical space to engage with kind of digital exhibitions.
That's such an important question. Digital exhibits exist exactly like past the point of their physical, or just only in a digital sphere. And so how do people engage with that? And what do people expect from a museum that's representing that? I'm really privileged in the fact that I work with Museum of Anthropology, and our education department actually created a teaching kit of loanable puppets. So it can go out to schools. It has tons of resources to speak to storytelling and different cultures' representations of different stories. And so that's something that's most definitely used. And it's kind of like a nice takeaway to be like, this exhibit you can't physically see, but you can use this and you can look at the digital. For digital exhibits that are created after physical or even during the physical exhibits, but those close, I think it is something that I don't know if I paused on it, but you see on one of our, I think our welcome page, like the dates of the exhibit that are in person. And it's something that's reiterated on our about as well, that it is no longer visitable in person. I think just being really clear that something is like digital only, and like not in a bad way. Like, I just think it needs to be like something that's clear for the user to understand. Also, doesn't have to be a website. Like, I've seen digital exhibits that exist on Instagram. I've seen digital exhibits that exist on websites in these like VR scans, but I've also used like just like really like Google websites you can use to create really simple exhibitions online. So I think born digital is just as important. And I think like that interweaving relationship, when I was researching digital exhibits, a lot of the articles were talking about this like parallel curation experience of curating physical and in person. And I really challenge that idea that they're parallel, because I think it's a constant intersection between how does someone experience something in person and what is the intention of that, versus how does someone experience something digitally and what is the intention behind that, and where do things line up and where do things need to be approached differently. I think there's also a lot of benefits to things when you have a physical exhibit, but there's also really nice benefits when something's born digital. Is in some of the text panels there's typos, and so that live forever, versus something born digital, you can edit that, or you are not stuck within like the limitations of what worked physically when you're creating the digital. So that's one of the reasons why yes, we have the VR scan and we encourage people to go through it. And that's what we thought was going to be the main focus of the website. But as we approached it, we realized it's not the most useful. The most useful part is the content. And if we can represent the content in more than one way that makes sense digitally, then now I kind of look back and I'm like, I love that you can see how the show looked like digitally, but I think it's easier to engage with in all these different ways, like in the ways that we deconstructed the stages and in the ways that we highlight different stories and highlight different activities. So I don't think it always has to be something that like starts with the physical. I feel like I kind of went on a tangent, but did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
It looks like we have some questions in the chat as well. So Anna is asking, do you know other museums that are moving towards using more digital exhibitions, either inside or outside of Canada?
Everyone. I would say that just about everybody is realizing that having just a physical footprint of exhibitions is not enough. Obviously, really spurred by COVID, but a lot of exhibits are beginning to put some form of a digital representation kind of in collaboration with their physical. There's the Virtual Museum of Canada, which funds digital exhibition projects. Their exhibitions tend to be quite didactic and very similar to kind of what we'd expect from a digital exhibit, where you've got a website with a photo and a description, and you can arrow over and it's another photo and another description. And it's a bit like a slideshow that lives on a website. But they've recently kind of overhauled the process and have started some more inventive experiences. The British Museum has been doing quite a bit, of course. But yeah, I would say like after COVID, everyone has started putting their stuff on digitally and like online. What's happening now is a conversation within museums of how do we live with both? How do we prioritize the digital without not prioritizing the physical now that we have people in galleries again? And in what ways do people engage with the online sphere, even within the physical gallery? So starting to add QR codes with an exhibition label, starting to add maybe AR that you can engage with. Some of the great opportunities for it is adding audio. So being able to scan something and hear something, or adding more video that wouldn't have fit within a physical exhibit. And I think that's a really interesting conversation of like, where is the intersection of using both at the same time, as well as them individually.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
There's a question from Jamie. I'd love to know what sort of steps you took, or what Matterport offers for digital accessibility.
Jamie, do you feel comfortable defining what you mean by digital accessibility? If not, that's okay. I can guess.
Maybe you can start with what you think of when you think of digital accessibility, because I know I think of a few different things.
So I think of like digital access. If you don't have the internet, you can't access our Matterport scan. Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. That's what was my second guess, was for, yeah, blind or low vision screen readers. It's something that when we first started speaking to, we felt like we had we really struggled within Matterport figuring out how screen readers can work. But it's actually, I went for dinner and drinks with Nikki quite recently, and it was one of the conversations we had of we should reevaluate the text panels that we did to make sure that screen readers can read them. The website, I believe, can be read by screen readers, but within the Matterport, editing it is a bit more complicated. And so that's somewhere that we want to like channel some energy into. As somebody who doesn't have low vision, it wasn't something I thought of in the very beginning, but it's something that I've been having a lot of conversations with other people who work within digital exhibits, of like how just in the last year, opportunities for making things more accessible have exploded. And so what is the best techniques used? And I would say that's probably like the next stage of the exhibit, is targeting kind of each section individually, and thinking through like, how do screen readers use it, or how can things be read aloud? it's one of the also like descriptive tours, like how does that play into it? So that's definitely like the next phase that we've been talking about. And I think that's also something that's amazing about a digital exhibit is that you can produce it and then it can be iterative. You can come back to it, you can make changes, you can hear from the community that this or that needs to be done, whoever they may be. And we were also able to, when we first did it, we didn't necessarily have contact with all the different puppeteers anymore, or it's been interesting like who we've been able to connect with after releasing the exhibit. We've also been able to connect with museums around the world that have puppets that are similar to ours, and the ways in which like that research has also been able to aid in different work. So yeah, I would say it's probably like the biggest issue we have with our website, and probably like the biggest priority we have is to like move forward of like editing that. Yeah.
If I could jump into, I'm not very familiar with Matterport at all, which is why I'm so excited for this session. But you mentioned described tours. That's something that we're working on in our office right now. That was some advice we were given by an accessibility consultant when we were looking at our app. So a different kind of digital exhibition, I would say, like a mobile app that's intended to be used in gallery. And the advice we were given was developing a described audio tour can be really useful for folks who are blind or low vision for in-gallery navigation and for, you know, that description of works and for that in-person experience, but also offering it somewhere that can be accessed remotely. Like just looking at the puppet exhibition here, like you already have tours offered. It would be so easy to add a described tour to your suite of offerings there, and that can be accessed from anywhere, because a lot of folks who are blind or low vision have issues getting to our site because we're like way out in the corner of the city, and transit can be a little challenging. So there are ways that digital platforms can like solve some problems as well, that physical like in-person exhibitions have. So yeah, that's a really great question. It's something we should always be centering in our work. So thank you, Jamie. Are there any more questions, or are there any more examples of digital exhibits that people think are great, or that they think could use some work that we could learn from, because they could use some work? I threw the Digital Museums Canada, formerly the Virtual Museums of Canada website, in the chat for folks that want to explore the things associated with that program. But if anyone has any other examples that they want to share with us, it'd be lovely.
Speaking to a different form of accessibility, I personally have ended up getting headaches from Matterport tours because of the visual transitions. Is that something that's at all controllable within the platform?
I absolutely agree. One of the biggest things I found when I was researching digital exhibits before we launched ours was how they're kind of like, you have Matterport scans and they're really like fast or jerky, or you've got cell phones and it's blurry or it's really shaky. And how do we make that smoother? Within Matterport, there's one of the things that really bothers me that a lot of people do with Matterport is they'll film things within them, and then there's different ways to like capture within Matterport. So you can kind of screen grab on your own computer, or you can use their systems to capture stuff. And it is incredibly clunky to capture on theirs. There are certain ways that you can control like how you move in and out, but a lot of it you're left within Matterport's what they have, like what the limitations they have. Like it's just not made for museum exhibits, but it works a lot better than a lot of the other things I've used. So I fully hear the headaches, and that's like a huge part of why we wanted just other ways to engage with the content, and why we deconstructed the stages. And so what you'll see on the deconstructed stages is it's the text panels that we designed for the virtual. It's not the in-person, because we want it to be exactly the same as if you were in the Matterport, just without having to physically move around them. So yes, there's a little bit that you can control, but not as much as I think either you or I would wish. But I will say I was just opening the site because I was going to try to show you guys kind of how you edit stuff in Matterport if you guys wanted. And they've added so many new tabs to the capabilities. So I do think it's something that is absolutely being like, I wouldn't be surprised if in 6 months when I check, you can change the speed and the smoothness with which the transitions happen.
Wonderful. I was admittedly an atypical user because this was a touring show where my institution was the last one. And so I was clicking through the versions from the previous institutions to like find specific objects and find particular wall labels. So I was definitely having to do a lot more clicking than most people who are like, I'm going to look at this one and then the next one and then the next one. But it's great to hear about the ways that y'all presented different opportunities for accessing the content.
There is a fabulous question in the chat that I'm really interested in talking about. So I think it's a fully formed question, Colette. I'm thinking about the implications of digital exhibitions and the nature of collecting in general. If so many objects can be accessed remotely, how does that play into discussions of ownership or debates around objects being removed from their geographical contexts? Do you see these conversations happening?
Thank you. I think these are the exact questions we need to be asking when we speak about digital exhibits. I also think the power that digital exhibits have brings into play a lot of questions about repatriation as well. And if you can experience something digitally, then why does somewhere have to maintain it physically? Like, why can these not be returned home? But I also think one of the things that you bring up, which is context. I cannot emphasize how important context is. It's one of the reasons on the text panel is why you have a photo and the text, because we didn't want to lose that relationship between what these text panels are talking about and what these belongings represent. And we wanted to make sure that was really apparent, because it's obvious when you're standing in front of something and you see something standing there and a text panel right below it. But even in the VR, as you're moving through, because of how small or big your screen is, the dots are always the same. And so sometimes they all look like they're standing on top of each other. And we're representing puppets from all over the world. So that like geographical context is so important. Also, one of the things that we touch on both on the puppet maker side and on the podcast is that like nature of collecting, where these puppets came from, how they ended up at the museum, why they ended up here, and why this exhibition happened. And I think you're able to tell longer stories in that way in a digital exhibit, and you're able to represent more voices that maybe don't always get represented in a physical exhibit. I know like Nikki was really cautious about making sure that we represented voices that didn't necessarily get heard in the physical exhibit. And like conversations of ownership are huge. Like who owns even just the images of the puppets, or who owns, also I'm like using puppets because that's what I'm used to, but like obviously these ideas apply to everything. I also like, I'm sure all of us have been listening to all this talk about NFTs and that idea of like owning the digital sphere. I think there's ownership also of like stories, and there's ownership of, if you own a belonging, do you own all the photos of it, and how does that play into effect, and ways in which we need to be careful about the ways in which we represent things digitally, because it's really easy to share information and just copy a photo from a website and use it for something else. And so I think those are all things that also need to go into play, that maybe not everything should be shown. There's some pretty intense works within the exhibit as well. And there's a thinking of the stories in Amanda Strong's stop motion film that we thought were really important to share. I really encourage you guys to like watch both of the films, but there is an immense amount of context that goes into each of the different stories represented. And so I think that needs to kind of always be part of a conversation of how are we representing these things, and how can they be taken apart and shown somewhere else. And if everything can be accessed, should everything be accessed? Should everything be shown? And yeah, I think like that context part is what's really important, the context and like respect for what we're showing and the ways in which it's shown. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. I feel like it's a lot of just like my thoughts around it. And I know if you have any thoughts for asking this question, or if anybody else does, I think it's something that as like museums and as galleries, and as those of us who work within humanities or the digital sphere, we're all going to be facing these discussions more and more as more and more content is made available. I mean, the Getty put 400,000 images. No, sorry, the Met put 400,000 images into Animal Crossing. So what does it mean to own that piece of work in Animal Crossing too? Like, it's conversations of copyright and like all of that are going to come into play more and more as we embrace the digital sphere.
Mhm. Thanks, Colette, for the great words there. Yeah, just I totally agree. And I think there's like so many questions around consent because the stakes change so drastically when it comes to digital anything, digital exhibitions, digital engagement. So yeah, I think it's a really important thing to consider, that idea of like ownership of whether like who owns an image, a story. These are always things that we're, I think, hopefully thinking about in our lines of work. But yeah, often when it gets to the digital realm, I think it kind of shifts things a little bit. It changes the conversation a bit. So very critical.
Oh, sorry, Amina, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just saying, I don't see any more questions, and I know I only have 5 minutes, but I just want to highlight that what we did is we had a VR scan that we already had, and then we made an entire website, and it was a project that never ended, because as we faced questions just like that, we wanted to find ways for engagement on so many different levels. And as we reached different questions in our process, we were like, oh, well, how are people going to know about the work that was behind the scenes? And that's where the podcast came about. And then it was, but how are we going to show this? Or do we show the video in the exhibition, or do we show the full length? And then we're like, we can show both. Let's make a YouTube channel. But it can also be quite small scale and have a huge impact too. And one of the other things I just want to touch on is like the ability for public scholarship and how increasing access to information is so important. And so not gatekeeping that information that's within these exhibits, but really making it accessible to people who may not be able to travel to an exhibit, or maybe saw it but didn't take a photo of something. And just the power that that has as well to encourage conversations was something that I didn't expect to feel as important as ended up becoming a part of the process. And some things are really simple. Like if you are looking to digitize collections into an exhibit, there's something called WAX, W-A-X. You can use WordPress, Google Sites. You can use scans like Matterport. There's tons of different avenues. It can even be on a blog. There's so much funding that's available right now as well, if you look up grants for digital exhibits. And also it can be as simple as like Instagram or Twitter galleries. I've seen where it's haikus and photos on Twitter that you scroll through into this digital exhibit, that I think we need to deconstruct our knowledge and like, what is a digital exhibit, and open it up for all the possibilities that exist. And just creating anything is better than nothing.
That's fabulous. As we were talking, I realized that we have a great example of this at MOA as well, besides the puppet exhibition. Our museum is currently undergoing seismic upgrading in our signature Great Hall. And so if you go to our website, you can find information about that closure. You can also find a 3D rendering of the Great Hall before the closure. And I just think it's a really wonderful way to keep people informed about what's going on. There's a lot of folks who are, you know, really, like, this is a really important building for them. And also it's a place that holds a lot of cultural belongings, a lot of really important cultural belongings. So having, like, using this as a way to have transparency for that process and to keep the public updated, but also like to keep people feeling connected to MOA, I think is a really great strategy. So I just threw that in the chat if anyone wants to check it out. And I'm also, we have a former colleague that used Instagram to create a really cool gallery of digital art. And it was so simple. I'm trying to find that link. I don't know if I can, but if it's okay, Anna, I might pick your brain after the meeting's done, and we can get a list of links that I can send out to all the attendees today for some of these great suggestions.
Absolutely. There's also some really great online toolkits and articles that are really short, like just less than 500 word articles that kind of highlight key points. As Amina was talking, I also realized probably the most obvious example is that we have a digital exhibit and physical exhibit in parallel right now at MOA. Chicanx, Dreamers and Changemakers, features 33 Mexican American artists who self-identify as Chicanx. and is on display in the exact same gallery that Puppets actually was, in the Audain Gallery. However, it looks incredibly different. But it also has an entire online exhibition called She Connects Digital. And one of the great things about this is that the intention behind it was to really highlight the artists behind their works. They gave their favorite recipes of food and their favorite books and their favorite music, and we made playlists out of it. And it really goes to show the power for the digital to show so much like behind the scenes and connect on a human level, which is funny that we're taking it away from the physical and yet still connecting on a more human level. And this is a great example where it doesn't necessarily have a VR scan. I do know it's in the works, but how accessible this is just on the digital, like the intention behind it was to have all this extra information, and the way in which it's organized, you can scan the QR codes in the gallery to get more. So as I was talking about, text panels, so short, but some people only want to read 50 words and some people want essay on every work they see. So this is a great way to give everyone the level of information they want. So a bit of a choose your own adventure. You can read just the labels you have in there, or you can scan them and see so much more that exists. So encourage you to check that one out as well.
Absolutely, that's a great one. We have 2 minutes left, folks, so I'm gonna give the awkward 10 seconds an educator gives to see if there's any questions. Last call, any final questions for Anna today? Or Anna, is there anything you want to share about how people can keep in touch with you? Any socials or anything you want to share?
Yeah, like honestly, feel free to email me or honestly connect with me anywhere. Amina has all my contact information, so I don't know if you like send them out afterwards, but whatever you would like. My Instagram probably isn't going to help you very much. Maybe give me some new followers, but probably email is the best option.
Yeah.
But thank you for like letting me just talk about myself. I hope that was helpful, and like genuinely I love answering questions or just having conversations like this. So if anybody is in the work or wants to propose a digital exhibit to their institution, if they want any advice or a sounding board, I'd be so happy to be one.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. I'll make sure to include your email. I'll reach out to everyone who has attended today just to give you some links and to give you Anna's contact. But that was fabulous. Thank you so much for like just reminding us that digital exhibitions, digital engagement, it's not about replacing what we're already doing in person. It's about complementing it and about extending it and about expanding possibilities. That is super inspiring. And you've framed it in such a way that like, I think I could do it, and I can barely use Instagram. So that's saying something. Fabulous. I'm going to take off your spotlight so you're not a big head anymore. So wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today's Skillshare. It's so fabulous to have you here, and thank you for your great questions. If you're interested in leading your own Skillshare presentation, I encourage you to submit your ideas to the Google form that I'm about to throw into the chat. We're always looking for new speakers, and whatever topic tickles your fancy, we're looking for it. So please fill out that form if you'd like to share. If you want to check out our previous Skillshare sessions, you can go to the Skillshare playlist on the NEMPN YouTube page. This session will be on that playlist in the next week or so. So if you want to revisit some of what Anna said, you can also check out that playlist. And otherwise, thank you again so much for attending. I hope to see you at a future EMP Skillshare session or a future event with NEMPN. Bye, everyone.